What's going on, y'all? Minutes with Mellon. Usually we take a long video and make it shorter, but yeah, this one's a little different because of what just happened. I did see a video on Redacted though, said something about U.S. military bases being attacked, which you won't hear about in the news. I want to say one of them's Pendleton. I mean, these illegals are taking trucks and like trying to drive through the fucking gate, ram the gates and shit. Shit's getting crazy out there, dude. But yeah, this one's gonna be about what just happened with Trump. Tucker just did a good interview with Trump's son. So let's burrow in deep, y'all. Let's see what this is about. Oh, that's right. First, we're gonna play a Steven Crowder vid real quick. It's like a minute long, just to show all the shit, all the rules they broke, like in this case that just happened, which is unbelievable. So we're gonna play that and then jump over there.
It's almost unthinkable because it means the defense can't respond to some of these really sweeping statements. In my view, improper statements being made by the prosecutor. So it looks like Trump could end up in jail if he doesn't win in November, and they may try to jail him as early as July. However, the decision to appeal will probably take a long time, and so they're going to have to start putting into a plan B on how to move forward. But you know that a case is bad when CNN's senior legal analyst describes how the Trump conviction was a political hit job. Yes, the top legal analyst for CNN, Constant Negative News. Number one, the judge donated money in plain violation of a rule prohibiting New York judges from making political donations to a pro-Biden, anti-Trump political operation. That's number one. Alvin Bragg boasted on the campaign trail in an overwhelmingly Democrat county, "It is a fact that I have sued Trump over 100 times. Three, most importantly, the DA's charges against Trump push the outer boundaries of the law and due process. Four, the charges against Trump are obscure and nearly entirely unprecedented. In fact, no state prosecutor in New York or Wyoming or anywhere has ever charged federal election laws as a direct or predicate state crime against anyone for anything. None, ever." Again, this is CNN's top legal guy. Five, the DA inflated misdemeanors past the statute of limitation and electroshocked them back to life by alleging the falsification of business records was committed with intent to commit another crime. The crime? We don't know. They never officially said. Six, inexcusably, the DA refused to specify what those unlawful means actually were. The judge declined to force them to pony up until right before closing argument. So much for the constitutional obligation to provide notice to the defendant of the accusations against him in advance of a trial. In fact, you're supposed to ask the person, do you understand what you're on trial for? That was not done. Number seven, in these key respects, the charges against Trump aren't just unusual, they're bespoke, seemingly crafted individually for the former president and nobody else. Eight, the Manhattan DA's employees reportedly have called this the zombie case because of various legal infirmities, including its bizarre charging mechanism. But it's better characterized as the Frankenstein case, cobbled together with ill-fitting parts into an ugly, awkward, but more or less functioning contraption that just might ultimately turn on its creator. Now, this guy at CNN just laid...
Yeah, so that's crazy. Literally fucking crazy. But yeah, we're going to jump over to this one now.
If you asked me like even a year ago, I'd be like, well, come on, they're going to roll this guy over in a gurney. get them over the finish line. And I was like, no one would believe that. The whole premise of, their democracy, really relies on people actually still buying it. And right. I don't know that I don't know that they care anymore. Because like when they talk about democracy, it's a soundbite, right? It's not democracy it's not the republic they're preserving.
It's the opposite of what's happening. It's almost like you get kidnapped and the kidnapper has a mask on, but once he shows you his face, he's got to kill you.
Correct.
And they've shown their face.
Yeah. Again, I don't think there's anything they wouldn't do. I mean, you put out something, I think it was on Twitter yesterday, which was, sort of that extreme, like, well, if they can't get Trump this way, what's the next level? And I think they've proven that they'll do that in the past. I think we're now figuring that out. We understand it. I think the system's probably been broken for, much longer than any of us would care to admit. And for me, I saw it firsthand.
At least 61 years it's been broken since they killed the president in an election year.
Exactly. And for me, even when we started this process, I'd say it's safe to say I was probably the number 2 target of Russia. And I was like, well, there must be something to it. I know I didn't obviously collude with Russia, but maybe I took a selfie with an agent once because I took 10,000 selfies a day, right? So but even like knowing that I was a target, I was like, I still believed because I wanted to, right? I wanted to believe that America is the greatest place in the world, and you can do it. And I'm like, it's the FBI. And again, there's some door kickers that I'm still like, hey, they're home team. I get it. They're doing. Eventually, those guys are going to have to speak up, though, right?
We're long past.
I gave the door kickers a pass for far too long, which is like, hey, they can't go against the leadership, but like, when you're watching this kind of bastardization of justice, when you're watching this sort of lopsided level, when they spend more time, kicking down the doors of an Amish farmer selling unpasteurized milk than actually going after people committing terror because, they're trans or, whatever it is that they are, you really lose that ability to get that pass that I really wanted them to give. But I wanted to believe that everything I grew up believing was accurate, and it's all bullshit. It's just all bullshit. So we have to fix that. That's why we fight now, to actually make it so.
But you saw this on January 6th too. I mean, I know that Joe Scarborough and the rest of the liars presented those people as like insurrectionists and dangerous. They were actually the most pure-hearted and 100%. The most naive about they were literally walking with pocket constitutions saying, no, you can't do this. They believed in the system much more than the people who put them in prison who don't believe in it at all.
Without question. And you saw that. I mean, the narrative was pushed so much. The clips that they used were designed to create something that didn't actually happen. I mean, it's so sick. I always say, it was the first unarmed insurrection in the history of insurrections. I mean, it's never happened before, but arguably, I'd say probably the most heavily armed populace if they wanted to have been, right?
Of course.
But of course it wasn't an insurrection. It didn't matter. And they just wanted to run out the clock.
Like they could hardly believe this was happening. And I think you're describing the same thing. Like you really believed it in our institutions and our norms and democracy.
Which, before he goes on, remember the whole DNC pipe bomb thing? Remember the bombs they found at the DNC? How come that just died? Like, there's so many videos out about how that just fell off the map and why it fell off the map. They want you to forget about it. It's so fucking blatant obvious. But Tucker did another video about it. It's pretty funny. That's funny, the way it paused his face.
I did, and it took, again, I mean, literally threats of, you're going to jail for treason, a crime punishable by death. That's like not a great swing thought when you're going through it. You know what I mean? I'm like, wait a minute. Like,
if you're the father of 5 kids, that's
I'm
not.
And yet I still, at the beginning of it, I was like, and then it just, your eyes start to open and you see the games and you see the people that are on your side and you see the Lindsey Grahams of the world, right? They get on TV and they're on, Fox or something like that, and they're like, well, we must subpoena these people and we must get to the bottom of this. I'm like, well, you're like the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Like you have the authority to do that. But you're talking about doing the thing that you have the authority to do, but you're unwilling to actually exercise that power. So that was what disgusted me most about like the Republicans, right? You're telling your base, the people who are watching, like you're fighting. but you know damn well that you're not actually fighting.
No.
Right? And we see that so much. That's the
Such a
difference
betrayal.
between. It's the difference between the Democrats. I mean, they've shown, hey, they'll put their opposition in jail, they'll smother them, they'll silence them. There's nothing they won't do to preserve power. We'll write a strongly worded memo and do nothing to follow up. And I think as long as you have that sort of imbalance in the response, nothing changes. Because the Democrats, they'll take their win, they'll run to the bank, they'll laugh their ass off along the way, and nothing changes until we actually start fighting back.
I think a lot of people yesterday when that verdict came down, I'm among them, my first reaction was, wow, they'll actually hurt us. Like they would execute us, me, I'll just say, speak for myself, and there would be an MSNBC panel of former federal prosecutors telling their audience that I deserved it, and they'd be laughing. And the Lincoln Project would send out a congratulatory tweet, and I was like, wow, there's sort of a lack of humanity, there's a coldness, there's an evil under all of this that I think I underestimate.
I think we all did. And by the way, I think many still do. Again, it's hard to believe that you could live through these last 8 years or whatever, 10 years, and not think that. I mean, look at, that this is even, within 10 points in terms of an election. Like, I can't name literally a single metric, a single one, geopolitical, economic, or otherwise, like where we're better off now. And yet, they'll outraise us, they'll do this, the media still pushes it as though, Bidenomics is doing wonderfully for you. Like, I get it, I'm the son of a billionaire. If I'm pissed off at the grocery store, like, I'm not like one of these woke guys on one of these channels where it's like, my 3-month-old baby was talking about nuclear proliferation on the Korean Peninsula, Tucker, and she was crying. She was scared. It's like, I get it. Like, I understand where I'm come from. I'm totally comfortable with that. I've been blessed. But like, if I'm sitting there with sticker shock, like, what's the country feeling? If I see what's going on in my interest rates on my mortgage, like, man, how much longer can we do this? Then you talk about wars and trillions of dollars of spending, and then the Republicans are telling us that, the Ukraine is the number one most important issue for Republicans across our country. I've heard that from Mitch McConnell dozens of times. It's just not, right? I've spoken in front of more Republicans in the last year than Mitch McConnell has in his entire lifetime. And I think I've surveyed, probably I do it live, like just at a speech, 1,000 people here, 500 people here, 5,000 people there. It's been a top 10 issue at about 65,000 people for 3 people. One of them was a DC sort of beltway guy.
Yeah.
He felt very strongly about it. Probably he was profiteering off of it. One of them misunderstood the question, so he thought it was a double negative. So it was not, in fact, a top 10 issue for him. Because is it top 3 or top 10? And one of them, it was top 10, but not top 3. And I said, sir, and I'll ask him, I don't care, I want to hear it out. Like, well, I'm from Kiev, Ukraine. I was like, I'm going to give you a pass. So I'm going to effectively say, out of about 65,000 people surveyed in the last, let's call it 2 years, 18 months, whatever it is since the war started, a little more, I guess, exactly, basically 0 people have been in favor of this. But the leader of the Senate will tell us it's the number one issue for Republicans across the country. It's just not so.
How can that be? I was in D.C. last night. I never go back. I'm from there. And I took 3 people to dinner, 4 people at the table. Nobody drank for all 3. I am a teetotaler, so are the other 3. And it's a good restaurant, but not like a famous restaurant. Restaurant I've eaten at for many years. The bill was $800 for 4. $800.
Not drinking.
Not drinking and nothing crazy.
Yeah.
Like salad, steak, dessert.
Fishing trip, and we were coming back, traveling through an airport, and we went to a McDonald's, and it was my 11-year-old boy, my 14-year-old boy, and me at the time. It was the last, and it was like $47 and change for like an 11-year-old child, a 14-year-old child, and me. I'm like,
to head past an analysis of the case and sort of taking it as a given that what we saw yesterday was grotesque and really sort of the end of a fair justice system. But for people who've just heard that and not gotten some of the details that prove it to be true, can you just run through what the case was?
I mean, it's literally...
You know too much, I know, but to the extent you can...
How much time we got? But the it's a books and records thing, right? I mean, it's literally a filing. It's like a misfiling. And yet it's something that was never before tried as a felony, like many of the other cases, like one of the cases in New York where they changed New York state law to be able to, for 1 year, they changed the law for 1 year to be able to go back and change a statute of limitations so that you could go after my father. And then after that year, after that is filed and they go after my father, that was the Gene Carroll case. It reverts back to the normal statute of limitations because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to do it. This was very similar. This was a case that was, at best, misdemeanor type stuff. Remember, Hillary Clinton started with a similar thing. She got fined $8,000, I believe it was, for starting what was the Russia hoax with the Steele dossier leaks and all of this, right? That was an $8,000 fine. They want to put my father in jail for, upwards of 100 years, depending on how you look at it. And that's never been done before in these things, because basically someone in an accounting department put legal expenses for, paying a lawyer. It's unheard of. But you have experts when they say, well, it's a federal election crime. They wouldn't let the person who wrote the rules, wrote them, is the foremost expert in all of that, actually testify for us. The jury didn't have to be unanimous on the things that they charged. They just all had to sort of come to a general, 4 guys agreed on this, and 4 people agreed on that, and 4, that's unanimous. The bastardization of all of this thing, and just having been in the courtroom, candidly, was watching, when the prosecution, objected to something that we said, it was always, sustained. They let them, we couldn't ask anything. When it was us asking the questions, the uncomfortable questions of their witnesses, all of a sudden, we were overruled every time. Just the list goes on.
So you've made the case, and others who followed it carefully have made the case that this was a direct hit from the Biden administration. And
100%.
they point to a man called Matthew Colangelo.
Yeah.
Can you tell us who he is?
Yeah, Matthew Colangelo was the number 3 guy in Joe Biden's Justice Department. So from Washington, D.C. The other big part of this case, as it relates to that, was that they're trying to say it's a Federal Election Commission case. Well, name another case that's ever been tried that's a federal crime tried in a state court.
So Matthew Colangelo is number 3 at DOJ. So that's about as high as a prosecutor can ascend.
Correct. And he was moved to New York. Don't forget, Alvin Bragg, the district attorney that actually tried this case, turned it down years ago. They could have done this 7, 8 years ago, whenever it happened, but they didn't. The Federal Election Commission, the FEC, that would have been one of the things that's around it. They could have tried. The IRS could have done these things because if it was a tax thing. All of them chose to pass, including, again, Alvin Bragg, the guy who's trying it and just tried it right now, passed on this a couple years ago. Biden's number 3 at his DOJ comes up, and all of a sudden now they're filing the charges.
Can I ask
conveniently
you
right before an election.
A dumb question. So the number 3 guy at DOJ who's ascended this ladder,
yes.
Okay, what is he doing in New York?
Right.
I mean, that's a massive step
What is he
down.
doing? He's prosecuting his political enemies, Tucker.
Okay, but that's it. But nobody.
There's literally no other explanation for it. When you look at the bastardization of this, you have a judge who's a Biden donor. His daughter is one of the number 1 Democrat
When you say he's a Biden donor,
fundraisers.
he's literally a Biden donor.
He's a Biden donor, literally has written checks himself. His daughter is one of the most prolific fundraisers for the radical Democrats, Adam Schiff and She's made millions off of that. This judge allowed his daughter's clients, Democrat mega donors, to sit in the courtroom. It's like having front row seats, like you own the New York Rangers, right? It's think of how insane that is, right?
Yeah, just look and thinking how fucking crazy that is. The judge's daughter is getting money. People are donating money. She's giving them a front row fucking seat to see Trump prosecuted. These are sick people that like to watch people getting tortured and shit. That's how fucking sick these people are. Yeah, let's go sit in a fucking courtroom for 10 hours. Can't wait to see this person I don't like prosecuted. That's fucking disgusting. That's how sick fucking minded these people are. This is literally good versus evil. When I hear people say that, I thought it was bullshit at first. But this really is good versus evil. This is fucking sick shit.
Right.
But can I ask a dumb question? First of all, why would the number 3 guy at DOJ wind up in a state case? That seems like he must have been sent.
Of course.
1. 2, if the judge was literally a Biden donor and donating to, among other things, the Stop Trump effort, which I think was one of them, how could he remain the judge? How could he?
Because it's New York. What do you appeal it to? You appeal it to another panel of radicals, right? I mean, it was like the New York AG case, right?
Right, so Trump's going to have to appeal. Well, he's going to appeal to yet another group of people just like the judge he just saw. It's such bullshit. The Supreme Court has to step up and just put an end to all this. 100% just election interference.
Right? We got fined almost $500 million for paying back a bank on time with interest. The bank, who's the alleged victim, is on the stand being like, no, we love Trump. We want to do more business with Trump, not less. Having their portfolio was a feather in our cap that we used to generate other business. Doesn't matter. You're a victim. It's pure and simple political persecution. They're going after. There's nothing that they won't do to stop Trump, and they understand now, with years of experience in the White House. I think going in as a novice was great in many ways, but you also don't know who the snakes are. You don't know who the people who are going to actually help you and be sort of loyal to the cause, and that cause is being the duly elected president of the United States, doing the things you said you would do, versus doing what the swamp wants. Slow rolling what the president wants, all those unelected officials. And so I think the notion of Trump coming back now actually scares them so much more because he has that knowledge, he has that understanding, and I think that will make him so much more effective in a second term.
Well, and also if you're going to kill the king, you better kill the king.
Yeah, but you best not miss, as the saying goes.
That's
right?
exactly right. So are you worried? Well, a couple questions. Will this stop the campaign? Like, what effect is this going to have?
Listen, I spoke to my father, right after the verdict, today. I mean, obviously, it's a somber moment. I mean, you know me well enough. I can pretty much, fight through anything, and we keep going, and he will too. But it is a somber moment, more so for our country. So, but if anything, I would say it's actually strengthened his resolve. I think in 2016, it was the elevator ride right before the infamous escalator ride. Now we find out who our real friends are. He knew what was going to happen. He knew the celebrities would go, but he knew that, and he did it anyway. I think after 2020, he understood that if he just went home, he could go play golf and go back to building buildings and making millions and getting paid to give speeches and stuff like that. There's just too much at stake, and so he's just unwilling to stop.
I got to think a lot of people are looking back to 4 years ago and reaching the conclusion, well, if they'll rig a trial, they'll probably rig an election.
I think without question. I think, the reality is, what I see, on the ground, the amount of people from the demographics that probably have never voted Republican before, that are just, grabbing me at airports or like even walking down the streets, in New York the other day. It's amazing. I mean, I did for example, I was one of the probably most out there people in terms of rallies and campaigns, doing my own thing in 16 and 20, I think. Just for example, October of 2020, I think I did 104 rallies in that month. So like 4 a day for a month straight. Like I'm on the ground. The energy in 2020 was better than even 16, amazingly enough, but they had that ability to weaponize COVID and all of that stuff. We saw the nonsense. It's so much stronger right now, and we're still 6 months out. That doesn't mean they won't do, again, I don't even pretend to think that, hey, it's going to be fair, and they're not going to cheat, and they're not. I used to probably think that, hey, there's only so far they can go. Like how they're going to roll this guy over the line in a gurney and pretend he's, because I used to think they actually had maybe a little bit of shame, but that's not actually at all true. I don't think they care anymore. They're laughing at when they use democracy, it's a soundbite.
But they're never
they laugh
punished.
about at their cocktail
They're never
parties.
punished. They weren't punished for the Iraq War
Correct.
or the Afghanistan withdrawal or the lies around COVID, the vaccine mandates. They weren't punished for the 2020 election.
Oh, Russia. I mean, not only are they not punished, Tucker, they're given better jobs. They either keep their job and then they get a CNN contributorship to talk about preserving democracy.
But maybe, if you treated your kids this way, they'd be sociopaths.
I think they are.
Yeah, well, they certainly are.
They are.
I'm sure they had boomer parents who indulged them, of course. But someone needs to be punished at some point, right? So it stops?
I think without question. I don't think, we have not done that well, Republicans, right? The Democrats don't fear us because they know we'd never play the same game because we actually believe what they think is a soundbite. We actually believe those things. And it's actually hard. It's hard for me to say those things because I'd love not to have to play that game, but I don't believe there's another answer other than we have to fight fire with fire. As long as we're playing T-ball while they're playing fast pitch hardball, they're going to win. They're going to take their power. They're going to run to the bank. They're going to and laugh every step of the way. There's just not enough actual fighters there. When you look at look at the Republican bench, it's not very deep.
No.
In terms of the guys that you'd actually, hey, who's a guy I want in a foxhole? Who's a guy that'll actually fight? Who's a guy that's not going to succumb to the pressures of Washington, D.C.?
Who are they?
Right now, I love a guy like a J.D. Vance.
I do too.
There are a couple, but man, that list is who's next?
Mike Lee is kind of becoming that guy.
Yeah, Mike Lee's a fighter. I like Mike, and and it's interesting. It's one of those. In 2016, Mike Lee and I almost got in a fist fight on the convention floor. Like we were very different, but like he's a guy that I text with probably daily.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that once you actually have that relationship, you can actually people come around. It's like, okay, you were actually right.
Well, people change on the basis of evidence and what they
Correct.
see. My views are totally different from what they were 10 years ago.
I think the problem with DC is for conservatives, it's actually an easy existence. You can be a Republican in DC as long as you're a Republican light.
Of course.
If you're like, hey, say whatever you want when you're speaking to a group of 10 people in your little hometown. You can come to DC, you can vote with the Republicans like 80% of the time.
Yeah.
When it actually matters, as long as you vote with us, the Washington Post isn't going to come after you. They're not going to be protesting in front of your home. It's an easy existence. You'll get invited to the cool person Christmas party and, holiday party. I don't want to, they don't celebrate Christmas because they don't believe in science and COVID, and these days it's Vladimir Zelensky, the high priest of Ukraine, which is apparently the number one issue for Republicans across the country. But I've not yet seen that anywhere. It's but those are the people they choose to be their deities, and and everything follows that path until they burn out, flame out, or get exposed for what they really are.
How can you run a presidential campaign when you're fighting multiple legal battles, criminal battles?
Well, I mean, that's by design, right? I mean, you look at all of these things. They understand, listen, Joe Biden in a basement is good for Joe Biden's campaign. Because if you put him on a stage, it's a negative, right? He's incapable of getting through a teleprompter. He would get lost at this table.
Yes.
I don't say that as glibly. It's just,
it's sad.
It's sad. I feel bad. He can't get through basic things, and yet he's the leader of the free world, or whoever's pulling the marionette strings. Trump locked in a courtroom for 5 weeks while he should be campaigning. That's really good for them because he can bring that message to people. People understand what he's saying. It resonates with them. He's able to bring people over who would not have otherwise been able to or would have ever voted Republican. He's one of the few guys that can do that, sort of expose the left for what it is, expose what we're talking about, break through the noise put out there by the mainstream media, break through the noise and sort of the manipulation of big tech. Those are $1 trillion industries that are functioning as the marketing department for today's Democrat Party, and to be able to single-handedly sort of break some of those walls down. If I felt like if I was in charge of that, if I was in charge of the Democrat side, we'd be winning elections 99.9 to 0.01.
Exactly.
And yet they're still close. I think our messaging is there, and I think you see exactly what they're doing, but they're coming up with better ways to make it appear as though they're not censoring, while still continuing to perpetuate and push the ideals that they espouse and value.
No one interfered in the last election more than Mark Zuckerberg.
Or Google.
Or Sergey Brin. That's exactly right. So, but let me ask you, the convictions come down 34 yesterday, and your father goes out there and just basically raises the middle finger and says, we're going to win anyway. And within hours, Benny Thompson of Mississippi, who's a monster, Democratic congressman, says, introduces legislation to pull his Secret Service. Yeah. So basically they're saying, okay, we'll kill you now.
Well, they did that a while ago also. If he goes to prison, we want to pull his Secret Service. So basically, if we put him in a cell, we're going to put him in a place where he could be murdered.
But that's a death threat.
Of course it is. But
from a member of Congress.
That's insane.
Again, should it surprise us? I mean, you look at half the congressmen, get in their faces, make them feel it. I mean, they can say these things, and they are lauded as heroes. If we said something even remotely like that, we're literally inciting violence. I mean, those words are violence, Tucker. We've seen this. The double standard that's out there. I mean,
But how hard is it for you?
Congresswoman after Congresswoman, you have a Hamas caucus, in Congress calling for, the death of people in the Middle East. It's, well, that's okay. You can't do that. If we did something similar, we'd be blocked. We'd be off of every platform. We'd be canceled. And, again, different games. We're playing two very, very different games.
For the government, he's got Secret Service protection. He walks in the dog park in Washington, D.C. I happen to know for a fact because it's my dog park, former dog park, and he's got 3 guys following him, but they want to pull it from your dad.
Yeah. Well, look at what they did with some of the justices, the Supreme Court justices, right? I mean, you think that they'd be able to, do what they've done to even, Alito even this week, we're going to make him recuse himself because his wife hung a flag upside down. I was like, well, she can't express an opinion. What they've tried to do to Clarence Thomas, what they did as it relates to Gorsuch and others, it's insanity. If they did that to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if they were picketing in front of their house like they did Amy Coney Barrett, that would be a serious problem. Those people would go to jail.
Of course.
But, we'll let if that's the conservative justice, we'll let them suffer a little bit. We'll make sure but it's effective. Because then you see some of them, and some of them are a little weaker than perhaps their principles, and they're it's a little bit of, maybe I got to go a little light on this one because it's not worth the headache.
When the Democratic Party's militia shows up outside your house, it's happened to me.
Yeah,
people are intimidated by that.
Of course, and we see it across the board. It's designed. The Hunter Biden laptop, that's Russian disinformation. Here's 52 intelligence officers signing off on it. Oh, it must be. 4 years later, oh no, it's actually his laptop. There's no accountability for that either. But they're like, well, no, we're admitting it now. It's like, no, but you got exactly what you wanted at the time. We understand there's no accountability for it. That's election interference as much as anything else. Also, there was the stat.
Yeah.
I think it was 17% of people said had they known about the Hunter Biden laptop, it would have changed their vote in 2020. 17%. That's a lot of votes. And yet, that was the gospel. And if you said anything about it, we've had the conversation about, Wuhan lab leak theory. No, of course it didn't come from the lab that studies the virus in question that we fund. It came from the wet market 3 feet outside of the lab. And if you believe otherwise, we're going to pull your funding. If you're a doctor, you'll lose tenure if you're at a university. You won't, Fauci's going to not sign off on your grants anymore. And even if you're like, but you don't have to be a scientist. They're like, Don, how would you know? You're not a virologist. It's like, you don't have to be a virologist to know that it happened there. You just have to not be an imbecile. You can have mid, double-digit IQ and be like, of course it came from the place that studies the exact virus in question that was at ground zero of where it released, and not from 4 feet outside of that. It's insane. And yet, think of the truly intelligent people in positions of power in medicine and otherwise who went along with this blindly. Because, it was easier to do, and, there was a lot do not
kind of hard to do that now, though. Everything that's happened.
This isn't all that long ago.
Right, but I do think at this point, if you're still telling yourself those lies, you are lying to yourself. You are a liar.
But it doesn't matter. They correct it years later, but they got what they needed out of the ruse.
Right.
Right? They got what they needed. And again, because there's no accountability after the fact, it doesn't matter. They'll do it again. And they'll make it the gospel for 6 months, or I always say, the difference between the truth and the conspiracy theory is 6 months.
Yeah.
Now it's like 6 minutes, but they'll still get what they want out of that 6 minutes. Use it to manipulate whatever they need to, and I don't see that stopping. I see more people being awake to it, right? That 6 months moved to 6 minutes because people are not just blindly buying the BS anymore.
So how does it play out from here over the next 5 months? They tried to put him in prison. They're still. Do you think he?
So we got to overwhelm the margin of fraud.
So it's just to ask. It's July 11th the sentencing.
July 11th.
So
by the way, you think that's a coincidence? That's 4 days before the Republican National Convention. Do you think that's a coincidental timing, or do you think that's designed to throw a wrench into that? Yet another coincidence, right?
But what happens if can they remand him and put him in jail then?
I imagine they will try, right?
Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, of course. Does anyone think? And again,
that's too far.
That's too far. It's nothing's too far.
That's absolutely right. For them, nothing is too far. Look at what they've done to the fucking country. I ain't gonna play the whole video, but if you want to watch the rest, I'll leave a clip of it. But yeah. This shit is fucking crazy, y'all. Gotta burrow.